Hello everybody, my name is Pancakes and welcome to this brand new episode of Media Buffet. Today, we will cover a very particular topic in the sports genre of our episodes. A topic that has not been discussed before. Instead of discussing this particular league, we are discussing a specific team. That's right. Today, we're going to focus on one team's efforts during the postseason and what they've done to improve their team while they're actually not competing. That's why it's called the off-season, because the championship already went by, and we are currently waiting for the next season to start in September. This team is no other than the Pittsburgh Steelers of the National Football League. And yeah, it's American football, not real football, but on that. Today we're going to focus on the Pittsburgh Steelers and what they've done to improve their team thus far in the postseason. And let me tell you this, it's been a lot. So, let me give you a bit of context. Basically, the Pittsburgh Steelers, throughout the past several years, have had a roller coaster of emotions, to say the least. Yes, they've played successful football, and yes, they've made it to the playoffs on multiple occasions, but they've been rather disappointing to some because they haven't been able to capitalize off their success in the playoffs. In other words, they've made it to the playoffs, but that's it. They haven't won anything else. So, in response to that, the Steelers have made several moves throughout the postseason this ongoing week to ensure that that's not the case next season. So, what were the main problems that have been plaguing Pittsburgh throughout the past several years? Well, first up, veteran quarterback Ben Roethlisberger retired after the 2021 season, I believe it was. And yeah, the Steelers have been running amok with quarterbacks since then. They drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round of the 2022 draft. They hoped that he would shape their future, and they also signed veteran quarterback Mitch Trubisky in the same time period in order to guide Kenny Pickett more or less into what would become his future, kind of in a similar fashion to what the Chiefs did by drafting Patrick Mahomes despite already having Alex Smith in their roster, who, if you didn't know, is also a veteran quarterback who did a lot of good things for his teams. And yeah, aside from that, they had Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett on the roster simultaneously, while also having Mason Rudolph, who is a bit of a roller coaster of a quarterback, to say the least. Now, Kenny Pickett, as I mentioned before, was drafted in the first round of the 2022 NFL Draft. And he initially had a lot of things going on, especially considering that a lot of people were complaining about his athletic ability, and I don't blame them. The year he was drafted, 2022, is widely considered to be one of the worst QB draft classes of all time, and for good reason. We are almost 2 years into that draft class's anniversary, and quite frankly, their quarterbacks have shown little to no results. Kenny Pickett, ironically, was the only quarterback to be drafted in the first round, 20th overall by the Steelers. And the next quarterback to be drafted didn't get drafted until way after Kenny Pickett. In the third round, Desmond Ridder was drafted 74th overall by the Atlanta Falcons, and he hasn't had any success either. Matter of fact, they signed Kirk Cousins recently, so yeah, that's out the window. Aside from Desmond Ridder, the Tennessee Titans signed Malik Willis in the third round with the 86th pick, and they haven't had any results from that as well. Ironically, they signed Mason Rudolph from the Steelers recently as well. We'll get to that in a bit. And there were also a lot of other options signed. We had Matt Corral, which was another failed option. And we also had Bailey Zapp. Let's not get started with that. Sam Howell, who recently was victim of a trade as well. Ironically, the most successful quarterback in this class, was actually the last one picked overall. Completely from the entire draft, the last selection, 262nd overall in the 7th round by the 49ers, who selected Brock Purdy. And the rest is history because he's led them to 2 NFC championships and a Super Bowl appearance. So there's that. So back on topic, the Pittsburgh Steelers actually have had a carousel at the quarterback position because they haven't been able to secure a safe person to actually exercise that role. As I said before, Big Ben Roethlisberger, who had that position for the Steelers for the past nearly 20 years, got the job done, but he was aging quite fast, and the Steelers had to find another option, and that's why he retired in the 2021 season. The season following, they actually drafted Kenny Pickett, and they've had to handle the water since then. They actually went 9-8-1 in his first season with the team. That is 9 wins, 8 losses, and 1 tie. And then they actually went 10-7 with Kenny Pickett starting 7-5. But what happened is that Kenny Pickett actually got injured, and Mitch Trubisky had to step in. And let's just say it didn't go well for him. Mitch Trubisky was a former NFL draft pick. I think it was 2nd overall by the Chicago Bears, and things didn't pan out well with him. So he was traded to the Bills, who then traded him to the Steelers. He recently got sent again to the Bills, and I'll explain why. The Steelers, during this offseason, have actually had a number of moves at the quarterback position that have been shocking to me, to say the least. As a Steelers fan for years now, I can say that I did not expect this at all. I thought that we're going to keep going with Kenny Pickett and figure it out along the way. Because, to be honest, the Steelers have one of the best defensive lines in the entire NFL, and they have a really up-and-coming offensive line. One of the cheapest, one of the youngest, and one of the fastest improving. And yeah, the quarterback position was actually the one that had the most concern for the Steelers, since they were struggling with Kenny Pickett. Mitch Trubisky was a bust, and Mason Rudolph, who's actually the most unproved quarterback in the Steelers roster, meaning that he actually got the least chances with the most results. Basically, he got done dirty. Because during the last season, when both Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky were out of the question, Mason Rudolph actually stepped up to the quarterback position and led the Steelers to win their last 3 games unanswered. They beat the Seahawks, they beat the Bengals, or the Browns, I'm not sure, and they beat the Ravens to go 10-7 in a time of uncertainty for the team. And who's to thank for that? First of all, Mason Rudolph, who actually stepped up to what he had to do, similar to Joe Flacco. And props to Tomlin, and actually the most pivotal decision made by the Steelers in the entire season was firing their offensive coordinator, Matt Canada, who was actually quite awful. He was actually one of the worst executive officials in the Steelers management group, and I am glad that they got rid of him, because since then, the new offensive coordinator has actually led the offense to have a new breath of life. It's actually allowed them to have more dynamic plays. Since the Steelers replaced Matt Canada, they've actually been a more run-oriented team, and they've actually been able to make plays. That replacement is a single reason why Najee Harris and Jalen Warren both have over 1,000 yards. When was the last time that happened? The Steelers Super Bowl era in the 70s. So that's very good, mind you. And yeah, basically, when the Steelers replaced Matt Canada with a new offensive coordinator, they actually managed to breathe new life, as I said. And fast forward to the last part of the season, the Steelers unfortunately lost to the Bills in the wild card round. I wouldn't blame them. It's the Buffalo Bills. They've been one of the front runners for the Super Bowl ever since they drafted Josh Allen. And yeah, it's been quite good for them, but unfortunately not for the Steelers, who have had a losing streak of about 5 or 6 games in playoff appearances. They haven't won a playoff game since 2017, and that's concerning. Making the playoffs but then actually beating any teams is actually a very horrible look for the team. This was highlighted in 2020 when they actually made the playoffs with Ben Roethlisberger and a star-studded team that featured stars that are no longer with the team, like Devin Bush. And yeah, basically, the team started out 11-0. 11 wins, no losses, but then went on a losing streak in the latter half of the season and got massacred by the rival Cleveland Browns. Still one of the most brutal losses in the history of the Steelers' recent memory. And yeah, ever since then, they haven't been the same. Their center retired. Big Ben did a horrible rendition for his last season, and yeah, overall, it was just a time of mediocrity for the Steelers. But ever since then, we've had a breath of new life. The Steelers finished 10-7 last season, as I said, with Mason Rudolph at quarterback, mind you. If the Steelers had a record of 10-7, barely making the playoffs, with 3 different quarterbacks under center, and a replacement and offensive coordinator mid-season, imagine what the Steelers can do now. Let me explain. After the loss to the Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs getting their 2 beat, unfortunately, the Steelers have made a number of moves during the offseason. What do they need? They need a overhaul at the defensive side of the ball, because they have a good defense, but they have some aging stars like TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward, and they need players to load up that locker room and actually make impacting plays. So what did the Steelers do? They signed the Ravens linebacker Patrick Queen to a $6 million 1-year contract. And quite frankly, that's a very good option because he is a really good linebacker. And yeah, we had to get some new players in that side, in that position, and it's actually very good that they made this so that they can actually cover the ball and make sure that the entire defensive line does not depend on TJ Watt to make plays. And speaking of TJ Watt, his brother Derek Watt, fullback for the Chargers, I'm pretty sure, recently announced his retirement. And yeah, it's sad to see. But anyways, moving on. Actually, no, I believe for the Steelers, my bad. But, as I was saying, yeah, they signed linebacker Patrick Queen to a 1-year, $6 million contract, getting that requirement done. And the Steelers actually made a shocking move earlier this week that actually shook up some analysts. The Steelers have some of the best wide receiving corps in the NFL, and a lot of people don't like to acknowledge that because a lot of analysts write the Steelers off and try to predict that they're going to be mediocre and not make the playoffs at all, and Mike Tomlin has proved them wrong year after year. So yeah, the Steelers are one of the most underappreciated teams in recent memory in the NFL because analysts seem to not give a shit about the team anymore. So, basically, the Steelers have a very youthful and very powerful receiving corps, that being wide receiver George Pickens, undervalued wide receiver Calvin Austin III, and up until recently they had Chase Claypool, but the Steelers have a history of wide receivers that just seem to not follow proper conduct lines, and some examples include Juju Smith-Schuster, Antonio Brown, and most recently Chase Claypool, who I believe got traded to another team but then got released, so I don't know if the Steelers are going to retain him. But yeah, Chase Claypool most recently played for the Dolphins. I don't know if he's currently a free agent, but yeah, he's actually doing pretty well. But let's see if that remains the case in the next season. So basically, the Steelers actually made a trade deal with the laughingstock of the league currently, the Carolina Panthers, and actually traded Deontay Johnson, who is a hit-or-miss player for the Steelers, in exchange for some picks and I believe Panthers cornerback Dante Jackson. The Steelers have suffered an outage at the cornerback position for a long time. They've done so historically speaking. And yeah, they had some recent stars. They've had Joe Hayden, but he recently left the team. They most recently acquired Patrick Peterson and Joey Porter Jr., a stellar duo at the quarterback position. But to alleviate their cap situation, they actually had to let go of Patrick Peterson, and they stuck with Joey Porter Jr. Aside from that, Dante Jackson is now with the Steelers on a 1-year deal, I'm pretty sure. Either that or he got drafted, I'm not sure. But yeah, Dante Jackson was actually a pretty notable player for the Panthers. He made some great plays. And yeah, let's just hope that it works out, because the Steelers need to maintain that good defense if they want to actually compete. Now, moving that out of the way, I hope that defensive coordinator Terrell Austin can actually make some impact with these new additions to the team. But not to mention the following. This signing actually left me completely shocked because I did not know what to expect. And this is a continuum to the quarterback situation from earlier, and that is that veteran NFL player, Super Bowl champion, and one of the most underappreciated athletes in recent memory, quarterback Russell Wilson, was signed by the Steelers to a 1-year deal. Now let me just say this. I have a pretty mixed opinion about the signing of Russell Wilson, because Russell Wilson as a player, he's great. I mean, he led the Seahawks to back-to-back Super Bowl appearances back in his prime, and he led them to playoff contention during the other seasons that he was with the team. He had a small decadence with Pete Carroll's last years with the team, and later got sent to the Broncos on a 2-year deal. Safe to say that didn't work out, because he was released by the Broncos early into his contract, which made them pay him a lot of money, and he recently picked up saying that he wants to go to a team to win championships. And I'm glad that Russell Wilson actually decided to play with the Steelers, because compared to the other guys that have recently had the quarterback position, he's a much better option. Kenny Pickett threw for, I think it was 16 touchdowns, I'm not sure, in his 2 years under center. So in 2 years as a Pittsburgh Steeler, Kenny Pickett threw for 13 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. What did Russell Wilson do last season? He threw for 26 touchdowns and 9 interceptions just the past season. What Kenny Pickett did in 2 years, Russell Wilson was able to do in 1 season. And I don't think he played the full season. I think he got injured midway. But fair point, Kenny Pickett did the same in both seasons. But yeah, it's actually a better option, at least for me. A lot of people like to discredit Russell Wilson because he played for the Broncos and didn't get them to the playoffs. But let me just say this. The Broncos, after their Super Bowl run in Super Bowl 50, let go of a lot of their players, including Von Miller, who later won with the Rams. And yeah, it's just not fair to say that because Russell Wilson didn't get them to the playoffs, that he's not a good quarterback. My guy, Russell Wilson threw twice as many touchdowns as the guy who was supposed to take the mantle of quarterback for the Steelers in 1 season than the guy did in his entire career. What Kenny Pickett did in 2 years, or a year and a half, depending on how you look at it, Russell Wilson did it in 1 with a mid-team, a horrible team actually. And yeah, quite frankly, I'm pretty sure that this is a better option, because the other options would have been Kenny Pickett, who has clearly shown no true intentions of actually maintaining the Pittsburgh Steelers to a high regard. And yeah, it just goes to show that the guy was not ready and was not destined to become the next Ben Roethlisberger that a lot of people are asking him to be. Matter of fact, after the Russell Wilson signing got confirmed a couple of days ago, I believe it was earlier today, that Kenny Pickett requested and got traded to the Philadelphia Eagles for a number of picks. And I'm pretty sure this is ironic to say, but Kenny Pickett was drafted in the first round, and he was drafted for several 3rd, 4th, and 5th round selections. And that's ironic to say, given that he was the only quarterback drafted in the first round, but did not act or did not perform like one at all. It just goes to show that Kenny Pickett was probably not the best option to begin with, and thankfully the Steelers saw that early and didn't decide to retain him like the Giants have done with Daniel Jones for 6 years now and have gotten nothing in return. So, basically, Russell Wilson actually signed with the Steelers, and I'm glad that's the case. That's the short-term answer. Will he make a significant impact? That I'd say that depends on how the Steelers want to play. If the Steelers continue to be a run-oriented team, then they're probably going to be about the same. If the Steelers decide to guide themselves a little bit more towards the offensive side and catching and making long plays, then good for them. I hope they win more games. The Steelers had a record of 10-7, like I said, with a offensive coordinator crisis and 3 separate quarterbacks at different times of the season, and possibly at the worst times, mind you. And if that's the case, if the Steelers went through all that and still went 10-7 under Mason Rudolph and an interim offensive coordinator, then one can just have faith in what they can do in next season. Mind you, the offensive coordinator that actually took the Steelers' position, I went blank there. Basically, so the Steelers recently replaced their offensive coordinator because the guy that took the position from Matt Canada actually was an interim coach and wasn't the actual, he wasn't the full candidate that was going to take the position. So basically, the Steelers actually put Arthur Smith, former Atlanta Falcons head coach, in the position of offensive coordinator moving forward next season. Initially, a lot of people joked that because of the poor quarterback room and that Arthur Smith liked to joke around a lot with the players and move the depth chart around, that the Steelers' 3rd or 4th string players were actually going to be the starters and weren't actually going to have any impacting plays at all. Basically, that he was going to be awful. Now, I have faith, I have hope that Arthur Smith can actually juvenize this offense and actually breathe new life like the previous interim offensive coordinator did. And I just hope that it turns out well, especially with the new running corps that includes Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. And I'm just glad for them, honestly. I just want them to succeed. That's all I want. The main moves that we actually have done, signing quarterback Russell Wilson, linebacker Patrick Queen, and cornerback Dante Jackson, have been for the better. They've been to fill depth positions within the roster that were much needed, and I'm glad to see the Steelers actually taking action during free agency, something that they haven't done for a while. And I just hope that it works out. I don't want the Steelers to fall into decadence like they did in the 80s. I want them to continue succeeding as they've done for the past 20 years. Whether it be through Ben Roethlisberger or through this new generation, I want them to continue succeeding. Because even if Mike Tomlin already won a Super Bowl, he deserves another one. We've been to 2 Super Bowls under Mike Tomlin, and we went to 2 additional AFC championships under Tomlin that we were this close to actually reaching the Super Bowl. Why didn't we do it? The New England Patriots. Further proves my point, fuck Tom Brady. But aside from that, I just hope that the Steelers succeed. I just remembered the guy who recently got appointed as interim offensive coordinator after Matt Canada. That was Eddie Faulkner. Props to Eddie Faulkner because he was the one that breathed new life into the offense mid-season. I don't know why they didn't retain him, but I hope that Arthur Smith can do just as good of a job. Even a better job, who knows? But yeah, I just hope that they can do well. That's all I ask. Maybe I'd say that the floor, the worst case scenario for the Steelers, is if there's a complete meltdown at the quarterback position and every starting player gets injured and Mike Tomlin has sweat up to his knees. And if that happens, even then with his coaching ability, I'd say the worst that can happen is 7-10 or 8-9, which I heavily doubt is going to happen. But the ceiling, I'd say, is actually winning a playoff game. Like, why not? We have a ton of new young players. A couple of positions have been addressed thus far, and it seems like the Steelers are going all in this season. And props to General Manager Omar Khan for that. And I'd say that what's left to do is just address the remaining needs. I'd say that the 5 most pressing needs that the Steelers need right now is center, because they've had a lot of incidents when snapping the ball. We don't want that to happen. We need a center. We need a good offensive tackle. We need a good safety. We need good cornerbacks, and we need to secure a backup at the quarterback position, because Mason Rudolph was actually traded to the Titans, which I believe was a pretty unnecessary move, but hey, to each their own. Because now Russell Wilson, even though he just got signed a couple of days ago, is the only quarterback on the Steelers roster. They can bring one up from the practice squad like they did with Delvin Hodges, but I don't know. I feel like he's a 50-50 player, so I'm not sure. There's also another notable former Steeler that has been making the rounds because he served as the backup quarterback to Vikings Kirk Cousins in the past season, and that is none other than Joshua Dobbs. He was actually released by the Steelers and signed with the Rams afterwards a couple of years ago, and he later got sent to the Vikings, where he played the quarterback position when Kirk Cousins got injured. And yeah, I'd say that the safest options to bring a backup quarterback to the Steelers is either retain Joshua Dobbs, like sign him to another contract, either that or trade for Justin Fields, who is the Bears' current starting quarterback and recently requested a trade, but no teams have actually mobilized to get him because he was connected to other teams like the Falcons, who got Kirk Cousins, and the Steelers, who got Russell Wilson. Now, because at the time of the Justin Fields trade drama, the Steelers had 3 quarterbacks at their roster, the market was cold. But we don't know if the Steelers are now going to make a move for Justin Fields. And quite frankly, I don't know, honestly. If the Steelers sign Justin Fields, I wouldn't know what to feel like, because yes, we had a star like Russell Wilson who is definitely going to make an impact at the position. I don't know if it's going to be a long-term impact, but short-term, definitely. Definitely better than Kenny Pickett currently. And I just want to talk about that again, man. It just goes to show that Kenny Pickett did not have what it takes to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. And I'm not saying that the Pittsburgh Steelers are better than any other team in the NFL, but I'm just saying, playing for the Steelers isn't like playing for any other team. Playing for the Steelers is a commitment, because when you carry that black and gold helmet, that black and yellow helmet on your head, you're representing the organization, the same organization that won the record most Super Bowls in NFL history, aside from the Patriots, who tied the record afterwards. And you're representing the organization that has proudly held that remark for several years. The organization that has been known for its tough, bad-mouth, sports-like play. And yeah, I frankly don't want players like Kenny Pickett under center tarnishing that reputation, especially with no bullshit coaches like Mike Tomlin. So yeah, I'm just glad that the Steelers are making big moves, like signing Russell Wilson, but I want them to solidify the roster. That's all I want. Like I said, a good option is either signing Justin Fields through a trade or retaining Joshua Dobbs. A third option that I think is kind of unlikely, but if they really want to take the risk, is either signing... Hold up. Signing Jimmy Garoppolo, who notably played for the Patriots as Tom Brady's backup, then starting quarterback for the 49ers, and then for the Raiders, and just recently got released. They could sign him, but I don't know what that's going to take on the cap hit. And same goes for Ryan Tannehill, but Ryan Tannehill, I would believe he's washed. He recently came off a disappointing season with the Titans, even after his heroics in past seasons. But yeah, generally speaking, I just hope that the Steelers make a safe bet at the quarterback position, because it is one of the most crucial in the sport, and I don't want them to mess around like what they did with Kenny Pickett. And yeah, Russell Wilson is starting, apparently, and I hope that they can lock down a good option for backup. What they could do is maybe trade up in the draft, or they could actually try and trade with one of the lower picks from the first or second round, so they can actually draft a backup quarterback from there. Or they could sign one of the players I mentioned in free agency, those being Justin Fields, Jimmy G, Ryan Tannehill, or Joshua Dobbs. I believe that the most likely options are either Justin Fields or Joshua Dobbs. They're the most recent, renowned players who just make sense. Joshua Dobbs because, he was previously with the Steelers during that 2019 mid-carnival. And Justin Fields because he's been linked a lot to them recently. I mean, the Steelers did sign Dwayne Haskins to a deal before he unfortunately died in that car accident. And I'd say that Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields have the same scenario. They're actually good quarterbacks who are unfortunately plagued by playing for the worst team in the league. If not the worst team, then one of the most underwhelming teams. And yeah, I just hope that they can lock down good players. And for the backup quarterback position, it's either draft someone in the third or fourth round, or sign one of those players, or promote someone from the training squad. But I don't think that's a good option. Now, for the other needs, linebacker, we did get Patrick. We got Patrick Queen, but I feel like knowing the Steelers are probably going to go for a mid-draft linebacker, 4th or 5th round maybe, but I don't know. Oh my god, this sparkling water is hitting different. So what I could see them going for in the first round of the draft, they currently pick 26 overall, I'm pretty sure. Let me just corroborate that real quick. And yeah, the Steelers do have one first round selection, and that selection is at number 20. Yes, 20. And I'd say that they should draft one of three positions. They should draft a center, an offensive tackle, or a linebacker. They don't have any other crucial needs. They kind of are going for a gambit with Russell Wilson, but they have to lock down a backup quarterback no matter what. So the Steelers are going to sign a quarterback, whether it be through draft or through free agency. But it's not their most pressing need right now. The Steelers need to solidify their offense because it's the most devastated part of the team at the moment. It has needs for a center since Marquise Pouncey retired in 2020 after that stutter season. And yeah, a lot of mock drafts have actually played Jackson Powers Johnson to play for the team from Oregon. But I don't know. Other teams seem like they're interested in picking him, so I don't know what the Steelers are going to do with that. But yeah, I believe that they should draft either a center or an offensive tackle. Some players that have been mentioned is Jackson Powers-Johnson from Oregon to be drafted as a center, which is a good option. Or they could go to draft an offensive tackle to complement Broderick Jones, who is the most recent Steelers option at that position. And the player that's been mentioned so far for that position is Troy Fautanu from Washington. And yeah, honestly, I just hope that whoever they pick, they believe in them. And not just believe in them in the mediocre way like Kenny Pickett, but believe in them that they will bring them to success and hopefully to actually win a playoff game. I just hope that these players can actually achieve that. And I have my fingers crossed. Another thing that the Steelers could do is actually trade their lower picks to actually get another pick in the first round. I'd say that the most likely option for them is, trade with another one of the lower franchises, one that has a lot of picks. They could trade with the Arizona Cardinals for the 27th pick. They could offer like a third or fourth round pick for that and some players or a future pick. They could either go for that or go with the go with the Niners, because the Niners have one of the most dynamic offensive lines, and I don't think that they would mind if the Steelers actually offered a trade. So they could either trade with the Niners to get number 31st, or with the Cardinals to get number 27. And yeah, some of the names that have been mentioned to occupy the Steelers' needs are Troy Fautanu as a tackle, or Amarius Mims as a tackle from Georgia, and Jackson Powers-Johnson as a center from Oregon. But yeah, I just hope that whoever they pick and whoever they decide for these positions can actually satisfy the Steelers' needs, and under this new dynamic scheme of Arthur Smith offense and a renewed dynamic from Mike Tomlin's team, that they can actually achieve success, because I believe this is a make or break season for the Steelers, and if they don't perform, things could look bad in the future. But that's just my opinion. Let's see what the Steelers do in the upcoming season. That's been all for today. I'm glad you enjoyed. If you enjoyed our discussion on this topic, feel free to check out the Media Buffet YouTube channel for more content, and feel free to check out any other of our associates' YouTube channels or programs or anything that they might advertise. Check out our other episodes that have been published thus far. Me personally, I am Joe Pancakes, renowned writer, and Pancakes, an actual musician on YouTube. You can check out my channel at The Real Pancakes or PNKYX. So yeah, there's that. I hope you enjoyed, and see you all in the next one. Good night. And once again, go Steelers.